Everyone assumed she was just the help. He assumed she wouldn't notice. She noticed everything. That night, when his world collapsed into silence and darkness, the woman he had dismissed without a second glance turned out to be the only reason he was still breathing by morning. No one expected it. Not even her. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when the phone call came. Min-jun stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, watching the city blur through water-streaked glass. His reflection stared back at him, suit immaculate, jaw tight, eyes carrying a weight that no tailor could ever cut away. The call had been from his brother. Or rather, from his brother's lawyer. He set the phone face down on the marble counter and didn't pick it up again. Outside, the city kept moving, cars, people, lives rushing past without pause. He pressed one hand flat against the cold glass and just stood there. In his chest, something that had been cracking for weeks finally split clean through. But he didn't make a sound. Men like Min-jun never did. And somewhere in the building below, a door was about to open. Min-jun Kang had built his empire on control. Every meeting calculated. Every relationship measured. Every smile, when he offered one, used as currency. His name appeared on the covers of 3 business magazines in the past year alone, always with the same description: the man who never loses. His penthouse reflected all of it. Clean lines. Cold surfaces. No photographs. Not a single soft corner anywhere. The housekeeper service came every Thursday at 8 in the morning, and Min-jun was always gone by 7:55. He left an envelope of cash on the counter and never once looked at the face attached to the hands that cleaned his life. Tonight, though, was a Wednesday, and something in the careful architecture of his perfect, controlled existence had just crumbled. He poured a glass of whiskey he didn't drink and waited for something he couldn't name, what no one in his world knew, not his executive assistant, not his board members, not even his driver who had worked for him for 6 years, was that Min-jun hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in 4 months. The insomnia had started quietly. Then the headaches. Then the episodes where his vision would tunnel at the edges and the world would tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath him had decided to stop being reliable. He had seen 2 doctors privately, paid for their silence, and ignored their advice. There was no time for weakness. There was never time for weakness. He loosened his tie for the first time all day, sat on the edge of his couch, and pressed his fingers to his temples. The whiskey glass caught the city light and glowed amber on the table. Something inside him whispered that tonight felt different. He didn't know yet just how right that feeling was. At T35, Kang Min-jun was the kind of man rooms noticed before he even spoke. He had his father's height, his mother's silence, and something entirely his own in the set of his shoulders, a readiness, like a man always prepared for the next blow. He had taken over the family corporation at 28 after his father's stroke, doubled its value in 3 years, and buried every rival who thought his youth was a weakness. Ruthless, his competitors said. Focused, his allies said. Alone, his reflections said, though no one was ever close enough to hear it. He kept people at arm's length with the precision of a man who had learned exactly how much damage closeness could do. His phone lit up again on the counter. His brother's lawyer. He turned it face down again. Whatever came next, he would handle it alone. He always handled everything alone. The one thing Min-jun had never been able to control was his health. He didn't talk about it. The condition had been identified when he was 22, a heart arrhythmia that doctors called manageable, provided he managed his stress, took his medication, and didn't push his body past its limits. He had done all 3 things wrong for 4 consecutive months. The medication sat in the cabinet above his bathroom sink, taken irregularly, skipped on mornings when the day's schedule demanded a sharp mind, and he irrationally believed the pills made him slower. Tonight, he realized with a cold drop of awareness, he hadn't taken them in 5 days. He pushed up from the couch and moved toward the bathroom. His hand found the doorframe first. The world tilted. He blinked it back and breathed through it. He was fine. He was always fine. Until one day, he wasn't. It was at 9:47 that the buzzer rang. Min-jun stared at the intercom with an expression that could have frozen the rain outside. He had forgotten. He had completely, uncharacteristically forgotten. The cleaning service, The premium after-hours emergency call he had made last week in a moment of distraction, scheduling it for this Wednesday evening because a client dinner was coming Thursday morning. He pressed the intercom. "You'll need to come back another time." A pause. A soft voice, carefully professional. "Of course, sir. I apologize for the inconvenience. I can reschedule. Don't bother." He released the button. Then he pulled his jacket back on, picked up his phone, and started reviewing the legal documents his brother's lawyer had sent. It was a simple decision. Barely a decision at all. He didn't even remember her voice 10 minutes later. But she was still standing at the door. Park Soo-ah had learned early in life not to take up too much space. She was 25, with long dark hair she kept tied back when she worked and soft eyes that absorbed everything they saw. Faces, emotions, the particular way a person's shoulders curved when they were trying to hold something heavy without asking for help. She had studied nursing for 2 years before the money ran out, and now she worked 3 jobs, this premium cleaning service being the one she almost quit every other week. Almost. She stood outside the elevator after the intercom cut off, her supply bag over one shoulder, and breathed slowly. She had been dismissed before. It was fine. She turned to press the elevator button. Then she stopped. Something had been off in his voice. Not rudeness, she was used to rudeness. Something underneath it. Something tight and airless, like a person breathing with only half their lungs. Soo-ah stood in the hallway for a long moment, her hand hovering near the elevator button without pressing it. She had no reason to stay. The client had dismissed her clearly. She would be paid a half-rate cancellation fee, barely worth the travel, and she could go home, eat the soup she had left cooling on her kitchen counter, and sleep before her 6 a.m. shift at the convenience store. That was the rational choice. That was the smart choice. She pressed her lips together and looked at the closed department door. In nursing school, her professor had said that the most important thing you could develop wasn't technical skill. It was the instinct that told you something was wrong before the monitors did. Soo-ah had always had that instinct. Right now it was pulling at her like a thread tied to her ribs. She didn't press the elevator button. She sat down quietly on the small bench in the hallway, the one place there for delivery waiting, and she stayed. She told herself she would wait 10 minutes. Just 10. She pulled out her phone and pretended to scroll, though her eyes kept returning to that closed door. She had cleaned this apartment once before, 3 weeks ago when a different team member had called in sick and Soo-ah had covered. She remembered the emptiness of it. Not the unlived emptiness of a vacation home, but the particular hollowness of a place where someone lived intensely and alone. She remembered a single coffee cup on the counter, a jacket thrown over a chair with the exhaustion of someone who had stopped caring about small things, a pill organizer in the bathroom, open, most compartments untouched. She had noted it the way her nursing training had taught her to note things, quietly, without judgment, filing it away. Now, sitting in this hallway, something about that pill organizer came back to her clearly. And her 10 minutes became 20 inside the apartment. Min-jun had moved back to the window. He had reviewed 40 pages of legal documents, made 2 calls he didn't want to make, and was now standing with his forehead resting against the cool glass in a posture no one in his professional life would have ever believed possible. He thought about calling his doctor. Discarded it. He thought about taking his medication now, days late, and decided tomorrow was soon enough. He thought about his brother and felt a grief so old and complicated it had no shape anymore, just weight. His vision had tunneled twice in the past hour. His heartbeat felt wrong. Not painful, just arrhythmic, like a song with the timing slightly off. He was used to it. He knew how to breathe through it. What he didn't know, what no controlled man ever wants to admit, was that this time, breathing through it was not going to be enough. The city lights blurred beneath him. His hand slipped from the glass. Soo-ah had been in the hallway for 31 minutes when she heard it. Or rather, when she stopped hearing something. It was hard to explain, even to herself later. The building had ambient sound, the elevator hum, distant music from another floor, the particular white noise of a city at night pressing through walls. And underneath all of it, the soft sounds of occupancy, the sense that behind that door, someone was present and moving. She wasn't sure when that sense stopped, but it did. She stood up slowly from the bench. She listened. Nothing wrong. Probably nothing wrong. He was just being quiet and she was being strange and she needed to go home. She picked up her bag, put it down again, walked to the door, pressed her ear close, not touching, just near. Silence. Then a sound. A very small sound, like something expensive breaking. Inside, Min-jun was on the floor. He didn't entirely know how he had gotten there. One moment he had been standing at the window. The next the room had swung sideways and his knees had decided, without consulting him, that the floor was the better option. He was conscious. He wanted to be very clear about that. He was conscious, he was thinking, and he was absolutely going to stand up in just a moment. His phone was on the counter. He calculated the distance with the precise detachment of a man who had spent his whole life calculating distances. Too far. His chest felt strange, not painful, just insistently wrong, the way a clock sounds when one gear slips. He pressed his palm flat on the cold marble floor and focused on his breathing the way his cardiologist had shown him. He was going to stand up. He was going to get his phone. He was not going to need help. He was not. Sir? Sua knocked. Lightly at first, service professional, appropriate. Sir, I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to confirm the rescheduled time before I leave. Nothing. She knocked again, slightly firmer. Sir, I'm sorry to bother you. I just need one moment. The silence on the other side of the door had a quality to it now that made the hair on her arms lift. In nursing school, they called it clinical intuition, the instinct that comes before the data does. She knocked a third time, her voice still calm, still professional, but her hand was already reaching for her phone to call the building's emergency line. Sir, I'm going to ask the building manager to do a wellness check if you don't respond. I'm not trying to intrude. I just need to know you're all right. A pause that stretched like a held breath. Then a sound from inside. Low. Almost too low to hear. Not words. Just a sound that a person makes when they have run out of words. Min-jun heard her voice through the door with a clarity that surprised him. It cut through the strange cotton wool feeling that had been filling his head for the past several minutes. He should tell her to go. He formed the words clearly in his mind. I am fine. Please leave. What came out when he opened his mouth was closer to a breath, an exhale that had no authority in it whatsoever. He hated it. He hated this. He hated the floor and his own heartbeat and the fact that his phone was exactly 8 steps away and might as well be in another country. He heard her say the words, wellness check, and something in him, some last, stubborn wall, went very quiet. He reached out one hand and pressed it flat against the bottom of the door. He didn't know why. He was not a man who reached out for things. But his hand moved without his permission and lay there against the cool gap beneath the door, almost like a signal, almost like a question. Sua saw the hand. Just the fingertips, really, appearing in the thin gap beneath the door like something out of a quiet nightmare, pale against the dark marble inside. She stopped breathing for one full second. Then she crouched down, her supply bag falling from her shoulder, and she pressed her own hand flat on the floor near the gap, not touching, but close. Sir. Her voice had changed. Gone was every careful professional air. What came out instead was the voice she had used in hospital corridors at 2 a.m. Steady. Warm. Real. I can see your hand. I need you to tell me. Are you on the floor? Silence. Tap once for yes. A pause. Then tap. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. She was already on her feet, calling the building emergency line, pulling her nursing training up from beneath 2 years of disuse like a rope she had never let go of. I need the master key. Now. Please. Now. The building manager arrived with the key in 4 minutes, though it felt like 4 hours. Sua talked through the door the entire time, her voice never wavering, telling Min-jun what she was doing, what was happening, asking him to keep tapping every 30 seconds so she knew he was conscious. He tapped. Every 30 seconds. That discipline, that control, even on the floor, made her chest ache in a way she didn't have time to examine. When the door opened, she moved inside without hesitating, dropping to her knees beside him with the focused calm of someone who had spent 2 years learning exactly what to do in exactly this moment. She checked his pulse. Too fast, too uneven. She found his pill organizer in her memory and his bathroom in 12 steps and his medication in 6 seconds.
She did not panic.
She had not been trained to panic. She had been trained to help, and so she helped thoroughly and quietly, and without needing to be asked. She stayed on the floor beside him while they waited for the ambulance. She did not look at him with pity. She had learned that pity was a different thing from care, and he did not need pity. She spoke to him in the measured, calm way that nurses speak when they want the body to believe everything is going to be all right even before the evidence supports it. She told him his pulse was steadying. She told him the ambulance would be 7 minutes. She told him, very gently, that she had noticed his medication organizer the last time she cleaned, and that she hoped he wasn't going to be angry at her for noticing. He looked at her then, really looked at her for what was probably the first time. She had soft eyes, pale skin, hair escaping from a ponytail in the particular way of someone who has had a very long day. She had been sitting in his hallway for 30 minutes because something told her to stay. He had no vocabulary for what that was. He didn't speak much on the floor. His voice came back in fragments, a word here, half a sentence. She didn't push for more. She sat cross-legged beside him with her back against the couch, close enough to monitor, far enough to give him the dignity of space, and she kept her voice low and steady and didn't fill the silence with anything unnecessary. Min-jun had spent 35 years being the most capable person in every room. He had never in his life been the person on the floor. He thought he should feel humiliated. He was surprised to find that what he felt instead was something closer to relief, a sensation so foreign and unexpected that for a moment he thought he was imagining it. Like a muscle he hadn't known was clenched for years had suddenly, involuntarily, let go. He didn't understand it. He looked at this stranger, this woman who had no reason to be here, and felt something that was going to take him a long time to name. But it was already there. The cardiologist at the hospital was thorough and blunt in the particular way that doctors are blunt when they want you to understand something important. Min-jun had experienced a significant cardiac event. Had it gone unaddressed for another 30 to 40 minutes, the outcome would likely have been different. These were the words the doctor used, different. Min-jun was very experienced at reading euphemisms. He lay in the hospital bed afterward, monitor beeping, for drip working steadily at his arm, and looked at the ceiling with an expression that could not be described as anything except very quietly undone. He had almost died in his own apartment on a Wednesday night because he couldn't take his medication, and because he couldn't ask for help, and because he had told a stranger to leave his door. The stranger had not left. He pressed his eyes shut. Behind them, for the first time in years, something that might have been tears made an attempt. When the nurses settled him into the room and the immediate emergency receded into paperwork and monitoring, Min-jun asked about the woman who had come with him in the ambulance. The nurse checked. She had given a brief account to the paramedics, provided his medication information, and left when it was clear he was stable, quietly, the way she had done everything. No fuss. No waiting around to be thanked. She had just handled it and gone. He found this information doing something strange to him. He was accustomed to people who stayed near him for reasons, leverage, access, advantage. He had never encountered someone who helped and then simply left when the helping was done. His executive assistant brought him his phone the next morning. He scrolled through the cleaning service's contact information. He stared at her name, Park Soo-ah, and set the phone down 3 times before picking it up again. He told himself it was accountability. He told himself it was the responsible thing to do, to follow up with someone who had potentially saved his life, to offer appropriate compensation, to handle it correctly. This was what he told his assistant when he asked her to find a personal address or contact number beyond what the agency provided. His assistant had worked for him for 4 years. She gave him the information and did not say anything about the expression on his face, which she privately described to her husband that evening as a man who has discovered his feelings and is absolutely furious about it. The truth was simpler and more alarming than accountability. The truth was that Soo-ah had sat on his floor in the dark and spoken to him in a voice that had no performance in it, and he could not stop thinking about it. He could not stop thinking about her eyes when she said she hoped he wasn't angry at her for noticing. Soo-ah was on her second shift of the day, the convenience store, 6 to 2, then an afternoon cleaning job, when she got the call from her agency. The client from Wednesday, the penthouse, the one she had stayed behind for, he had personally requested her. A standing weekly schedule, substantial increase in rate, and a personal note left with the agency that the manager had read 3 times before believing. She stood in the store's small back room, reading the message on her phone, and felt something shift quietly in her chest. She had cried a little in the taxi home from the hospital on Wednesday, not from fear, just from the release of held tension. She had thought about him more than was reasonable for someone she barely knew. She had wondered if he was all right without expecting to find out. And here, somehow, was the finding out. She called the agency back, said yes, then stood very still for a moment and breathed. The following Thursday, she arrived at 8 a.m. He was there. He had not left at 7:55. He was standing in his kitchen in a slightly less severe version of himself. No jacket, tie loosened, coffee cup in hand, and he looked at her when she came in with an expression that had had a week to prepare itself and still wasn't ready. She bowed her head professionally, because she was professional, and said good morning, and went to set her bag down. He said her name. Just that, Park Soo-ah, in a tone that had nothing of the boardroom in it. She turned. He looked at her for a long moment, this man who had built an empire on words and now seemed to have misplaced all of them. Then he said, very quietly, "Thank you." 2 words. But the way he said them, carefully, like something he had practiced and still found unfamiliar, told her it was the most honest thing he had offered anyone in a very long time. Her chest went warm and soft. "You're welcome," she said. Simply. Truly, that he stayed that morning. Made coffee. Brought her a cup without asking if she wanted one. Just set it on the counter near where she was working, which was the most awkward and genuine gesture she had ever seen from another human being. He didn't make conversation easily. She had already understood that about him. But he was there, moving through his apartment differently than she imagined he usually did, slower, more present, like a man who had recently been reminded that presence was not something to be taken for granted. At one point, she was reaching to clean the bathroom shelf, and she saw the pill organizer, freshly filled, every compartment. She didn't say anything, but she looked at it for just a moment, and he was watching her look at it, and between them passed something that didn't need words. An acknowledgement. A small, fragile, important beginning. She had come to clean his house. He had sent her away. She had stayed anyway. And somehow, in staying, she had cleaned something else entirely. She still came every Thursday at 8 a.m. She still brought her supply bag and her professionalism and her particular careful way of moving through spaces. But now he was there when she arrived. Now there was coffee on the counter, left for her without comment. Now, slowly and without announcement, the apartment began to change. A photograph appeared on the shelf, then 2. A softer lamp replaced one of the stark overhead lights. Small shifts, the kind only someone who notices things would see. Soo-ah noticed. She noticed everything. She noticed the medication organizer filled every week without fail. She noticed his shoulders sat slightly lower than they used to, and the way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, not with hunger or intention, but with the particular expression of a man who has discovered, too late and just in time, that there are people in this world who will stay in a hallway for 30 minutes because something in them says it matters. He had sent her away. She had saved his life. And then, quietly, without asking for anything in return, she had given it back to him, one Thursday at a time.